Welcome to Mission Making with Rich. I am Rich, a mission maker at First Air Assault. Between mission making and other duties in the group, I don't have a lot of time to make individual mission making tutorials. So it's suggested that I let anyone who's interested tag along and join me as I create a mission. Even if First Air Assault members aren't interested in mission making, this video is a great opportunity to see what goes into each mission and the Arma magic to make things happen in-game. For at least this mission, which is Operation Census, which we've all played. This mission did take about 15 hours to create, but the good news is, only the tutorial stuff will be real time, and will speed up all the rinse and repeat parts of building a mission. But even speeding things up, the video is 8 hours in total, and that, my friend, is one long video. So, it's broken up into 4 parts, and this video is part 2. While we go back and forth on a lot of mission-making topics, this video focuses on the First Air Assault mission files, placing and managing AI, the hide and show module, comments, Jebus spawn script, waypoints, and advanced triggers. Enjoy! So now we've done a lot of dressing the set, in other words, putting down all the atmospheric stuff, the props, if you like. We can actually get to the fun part and start putting down bad guys. So before we do that, we need to make sure we have some files in our mission folder. At least if you're going to use the recommended respawn scripts that are highlighted in the First Air Assault forums. We really need to pull those over before we start putting down bad guys. So I'm going to minimize my game. I've already got my folders set up. And you can see on the left over here, I've got my actual mission folder. This is where old missions go to die. And then on my right, I went ahead and opened up Twilight Census right here. And you can see the only thing that is in there is your mission file. We should take this moment to point out the naming. If you look, I mentioned at the very beginning about using underscores instead of spaces. And you'll see that basically it makes it a very clean name. And I actually don't think I have a mission in here that has or use spaces where it would show the percentage sign that Windows used. Yes, it's right there, look. So you can see right here, this one, Highway to Hell, used spaces, and it creates that percentage mark to 0 right there between each thing, which can be a little bit confusing. If you don't mind that, it's not a big deal, but you can see the alternative right there underneath it where I used underscores, and it's just much cleaner and much easier to read. So that's just a little mission making makes life easier tip. So what we have on the right is where we want our files to go, and on the left are the files that are pre-existing. You want to make sure you're always using the latest version of these files. I obviously checked this before I started my Twilight deployment, so I know that the ones that are in there are the most up-to-date. So let's go ahead and open up the most recent mission we did, which would be Avon. Double click that, and you will see that this is inside the mission folder for Avon. The first folder is related to Jebus. Jebus is the respawn script that we recommend in the forums. Images, this is a preferential way of doing things. I throw all my images into one file. It just makes it cleaner for your overall mission file. Jebus is the respawn script, as I mentioned. Scripts, this right here, Jebus puts some of its side scripts. Basically what Jebus did is he took a bunch of pre-existing scripts that make AI do certain things like patrol and things like that, and he included it with his. So those separate scripts, like the UPSMON, are in a separate script folder. GOM is our laptop that we use to adjust, repair, and refill fuel for the helicopters. And this is as he tells you to put, so that's why you have the various things. Description file, we'll talk about that a little bit later. You're in it, we'll talk about that later. That one as well. Jebus, I'm not sure if it refers to his little icon, so we keep it in there anyway. This is your mission folder. You should never ever delete this. This is the picture that
the mission that we're currently making keeps looking for, because I just basically opened up the last mission, cleared everything off, and used that as a base. The foundational settings of that mission are looking for this picture. So I have one of two choices. I can pull this picture on over and delete it when I update the picture. Then when I keep saying the picture, this is basically the splash screen, the loading screen. When we come in, you see that fancy mission screen. Or I can go into the preferences and take out the line of code where it's telling the game to look for this. I'm going to go with just transferring everything over and deleting it later. And then again, UPS, this is part of the Jebus script. So we're going to go through and we're going to highlight everything except for mission. And you do that by holding down Control and clicking on each file. Right click, copy, come over here. Now you want to be very careful. If you copy that mission folder, or if you copy that mission file by mistake, you're going to overwrite all the hard work that you just did. Windows will tell you, by the way, you're overwriting a pre-existing file. What do you want to do with it? So, but pay attention, because that would be horrible to put in. There's probably been about 6 or 7 hours put into this mission so far, laying everything out. So it'd just be terrible to lose all that time that you put into it. Now we have all of our stuff in the mission. Anything we put down regarding the respawn script, if I decide to go in and test it, it'll have the files it's referring to. There is just one more thing that you need, and I will go ahead and open it up for you now, and that is, as a matter of fact, I think I might be able to just pull it up because I recently used it, is my cheat sheet for Jebus. And here it is. You can see that this is pretty much what comes with the Jebus mod. So when you download the script, this will be buried in there. I've added some alterations in there, and I'll walk you through what this does when we put down the first bad guy. So let's go back in game. So we're going to put down our first bad guy. So to recap, First Air Assault is going to insert Alpha up here as soon as they're set up for their Overwatch. We're going to have Bravo and Charlie, most likely in a Chinook, be inserted. I'm thinking somewhere around here because it's right between the two. And I can't remember which goes which way, but one of the squads will go take X-Ray and the other squad will take Whiskey. And they'll basically do a raid, go through, search for an HVT, eliminating bad guys, capturing bad guys. If they do find the HVT, we will basically put him in the back of the Chinook and probably hang on to him till the end. Make sure he's bound, of course, the whole time. So this and this need to be filled with bad guys and civilians who sort of look like bad guys, and maybe an HVT. So what we'll do is we'll go in and start putting down bad guys, and we'll put down the easy ones at first. So let's go over, make sure F1 is pressed, hit red for your Op4 or F2. It always opens up on the vanilla bad guys, good guys, etc. So if anyone knows how to stop that from already being opening, let me know. And we are going to use Takistan Militia. Go down to men. So you can see here that cup that you can see by the icon, these are all cup guys, have gone ahead and they're giving you not only a preview but a description of what each person does. We're not going to want any RPG guys because you're really not going to have any room to shoot RPGs. So we're going to be playing with the Enfields, FALs, 74s, and probably these other guys who are carrying just your basic weapons. So let's go ahead and start off with the weapon of choice for insurgents and take the AK-47. So this is manipulated exactly the same way as all your objects. You saw that I actually turned him. So basically what you'll do is you hold down shift to spin him around. If you look by default, the game starts with everything toggled to where he's snapping. And just to remind you, what that means is if I pull him over to this hill over here. He follows the contours, and this also will snap him to stuff. So if you see he snapped to that roof, this is really handy. The only time I've had an issue with this is, again, if a mod has what they consider the floor set at what is visually different to what's there, it'll look like your guy is floating above the floor. But that's the only downside I've had. So generally speaking, this is a good thing to have it when you're placing your guys. Occasionally it gets a little fidgety if you're putting people above stairs and stuff like this, so you'll just have to snap it off real quick. So what we'll do is these guys are basically going to be on guard. We're assuming they heard the helicopter, so they're going to be in a crouch position. They've pulled back, so they won't be seen until people come up to them. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that they don't run away, because if they run away, all you're going to have is about 20 guys just running around as you approach. So double click on the guy, or again, don't forget you can right click and go into attributes. It takes you to the same place. You can see this looks different from all the other attribute boxes. Again, we're going to be focusing on this section here, and then there's another section which controls the AI. So this one will set their positions, and I can't tell you how much better Arma 3 is than Arma 2. In the Arma 2 days, you would have to basically go in and put code in everyone's, each member's init box, and tell it to crouch. Set position middle, set position down. That's right, yeah, set position down would make them go prone, set position middle would be crouched, and set position up, I think, would be standing. And this is the init box. If you ever want anything to trigger code, stuff like this is all run in here. It's not used as much since Arma 3 because they've basically made everything accessible through the UI. So we're going to have him crouch. Then we're going to scroll. Now, just to save yourself some time, we can minimize this. We can minimize this. This is where you would change it to a player or playable. You can only ever have one player in game, but you can have as many playables as you like. So when you come into the First Air Assault server, just because he's the first person that got put down, 0 Alpha tends to be the player unit, and then everyone else is a playable unit. If you want to have a description next to the name, this is where you would fill it in, but we've coded the slot positions. We've hard-coded the slot position, so you really don't need to do that. So we can minimize that because we're not going to access that. I'm not going to go through all these until we come across them. The one we want is Object AI. I will tell you, once you learn these, they change things up a bit. We are using the Eden Enhanced mod, so if you're not within First Air Assault, some of these UIs may not look familiar to you because the person who makes Eden Enhanced is probably, for mission makers, got to be in the top 5 mods you want to have, because he basically makes everything so accessible through a click of a button. It's just insanely good. This is recently changed. You can see there's a lot of control over each of the bad guys. Now understand, you're doing this individually. So if you were to end up putting down 100 people and you're like, you know, I'm gonna tweak each one. Well, you're gonna have to go in and do that 100 times. Or you're gonna have to group them and go in and change them in a group. But then you don't have the unique abilities that you were probably looking for. So what we're looking for in this section is we're looking for this move, and you can see it tells you disables AI's ability to move. So we want to stop him from running around. There's a lot of things in here. You can stop them from targeting people. You can tell them not to take cover. They're not going to move, so we don't have to worry about that. And it just goes through all this, these options where you can take off stuff that AI are naturally coded to do within the game's engine. So that's how we want it. So now this guy basically is going to sit there until he's shot. He won't get up, he won't run around, etc., etc. So that's the first one. So let's go ahead and set down, let's do one of these. We do want to group these guys, and I will show you why in a second. So we're going to consider this guy our team lead, and you're going to see something really interesting about him in a minute. So what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and set this guy right here. Go into his attributes. We're going to make him stand the whole time. And move. And what we will do is, let's stick. Now there's two ways we can do this. I'm going to put a guy in here. I can either put him near my leader, and you can see he just snaps to whoever he's near. He automatically groups. And this is in the settings. If you don't like this, you can adjust this. So I can put him here and then move over here. And if you look, and if you got shot by this guy in this mission because I did this, I apologize, but it's the way things go. And you can see he's snapping to the floor of the building. We're going to put him behind these bags. Now we will have an advantage when we come in because this is going to be nighttime and these guys don't have NVG technology. You can see that he is managing to shoot over that. And then the other way of setting this guy down and grouping him is, let's just do the Lee Enfield to give us a chance. You can see he's, let's do it so he's not grouped to anybody. Let's put him over there, bring him in. This guy will cover the back door. Crouch, move. Now what I can do to set him up to the leader is I can actually group him. And you'll say, well, Rich, how do I know he's the leader? So see this little diamond here? That is always above whoever is leading a group of people. And that's really handy to know because you can see it both in-game, and then if you go into the map, you can also see it here. So I can grab this guy, and you can see the game considers him his own little army. Right-click, a little fidgety. There we go. Connect, group 2. And now you'll see I've got a little line. Just take it over. Bang. Now you can see he's connected to him too. So you're going to say, Rich, why do I want to have all these people connected? Because the method that we're going to do to have these guys spawn in game requires them all to be grouped together. You don't have to, but it's going to save you a lot of work. So I could leave these guys as is, and when we come into the game, what will happen is they'll already be on the map. We were talking earlier about setting up, being careful when you set up props to make them indestructible or simple objects so that the game doesn't have to worry about them. Well, obviously the game is going to monitor each one of these bad guys if they're on the map. So to save yourself, and this is why you can't have 300 bad guys on the map when we start, because you would then basically, it would be the Arma slideshow, right? So what we do is every mission maker related to this, every mod maker works out a system to where you can basically take these bad guys and put them off of a clipboard somewhere so they're not consuming CPU, and just put them down when needed. And it just makes the game flow that much better. So I'm going to show you one of the methods. It's one of the easier methods. It was one of the methods that you had to use before. Jebus has tweaked his script to where you don't necessarily have to do this, but I still do it just because it makes it a little bit easier. So what this is, and we're going to take our first leap into systems, and there's a lot of stuff in this. This is basically all the different modules that make things happen in the game. For instance, Zeus, all these modules do different Zeus functions. Game Master actually gives Zeus access. You can see we've got simplex support here. This is how you'd set up the module to make sure the simplex is available. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go to object modifiers. Again, there's a bunch of stuff here. You can see that we can open closed doors and set the AI mode and all this good stuff. If you want to really get into mission making, there's always something you can learn. We're going to go for the show and hide. So I'm going to just put this over here. We'll go to the map because it's a little bit easier to see what we're doing. I do have a method, but you're going to do your own thing. So what we're going to do is the first one, basically whoever is connected to this module, they will be hidden. You can see show, hide, synced objects. They'll become invisible, and their simulation would be disabled. So while they're hidden, they're not taking up any CPU functions, power, etc., etc. So we want them, and you can see it applies to a group of synchronized objects. So in other words, if I have a group of guys, I only have to connect it to one. If I have a bunch of individual guys, I have to connect it to every guy. And you can probably see why it's better to have them grouped. And you'll see when we get going in the mission, there's going to be a lot of lines down here, and they can get a little confusing when you're trying to work out what's going on. So, we know how to hide them, but how do we show them? I need the module for that. So you can either just drag another one over, or what I do, Control C, Control V. Now these are both hide, which is not good to me. So what I need to do is change this to show units. So in other words, whatever this is synced to, you'll tell it to show the units. So we want to grab both of these, right click, connect, sync to, and we're going to sync him to the head guy. Now anyone connected with this guy will be hidden. And I'll show you this. Let me put down a bad guy, and I'll show you what this looks like. And if you ever wonder why you'll come across a random dude that apparently is not doing anything, it's because Rich put him down and forgot to take him off. We had it actually happen in Avon. Alpha or Zulu came across a couple of us hanging on a hillside. And I swear I went and checked the map and I couldn't find any guys, but I guess I must have overlooked that one, so it does happen. So this is in single player mode. Understand when you go in and look at stuff in single player mode in the editor, it doesn't have all the same functions as when you're in multiplayer dedicated server. All right, you can see I'm standing right in front of the place, the alley where I stuck the two guys. They're nowhere to be seen. If I go over here, this little thing, that guy I put behind the bags of grain, he's gone. So you can see that by default, it hid the units. So to demonstrate how these guys pop into game, I'm going to show you how to do a trigger. So what a trigger is a trigger is a mechanism for you to tell the game, when this happens, I want this to happen. That's all a trigger is. If you keep it that simple explanation, it'll be much, much easier, because triggers can get pretty complex. You do want to be careful not to have too many triggers down in the game, because you have to understand every time you put down a trigger in game, you're telling the game to monitor this trigger for this event that you described so it can do what you want it to do. So if you have a ton of triggers, obviously the game's going to be paying attention to them. So triggers themselves come in a couple of flavors. You can put down a trigger that's got no area to it, and what I mean is you can't physically walk in an area and make something happen. These triggers are used, if you want a trigger to be triggered by a trigger, you would use this. If you want to do what's known as a radio trigger, in other words, you're going to put it as a command that you can access and flip the switch, this is what you would use. And then there's a bunch of other stuff, but those are probably the most common. Then the other type of trigger is one that gives you an area. In other words, this one is 100 meters wide across, and I'm saying that whenever someone or something enters this area, I want something to happen. I'm using it in this instance because I want to walk into this trigger and simulate what it's going to be like when we land, and what happens to make these guys appear. So this is manageable just like every other object that you have in game. In other words, you can grab it and spin it. And you're saying, Rich, well, why would you imagine spinning it? It's a circle. That's because we can go into the attributes tab. And again, you see you've got the position, the rotation, and I just spun it. That's why it's a little bit off of 0. And you can do a circle and a square. Type, this is something I never play with, so I wouldn't worry about. Activation, here we go. This is the, if this happens, this is the this happen. And in this case, you're not going to put many of these down. If op4 enters the trigger, I want it to happen because I'm going to use my op4 dude to show you what happens. This is saying what happens with op. Okay, so I'm looking for op4, but what's the situation? What is the event? And I'm saying they're present. The minute that op4 walks in this trigger, I want something to happen. You can have it to where they're not present. And where you would use that type of trigger is, say, for instance, your next task is going to be connected to all the bad guys being eliminated in a certain area, you would set down this trigger to say, once all the bad guys are not there, in other words, they're dead, I want this to happen. So that's when you would use not present. Always make sure to do a server only, because that way you're telling the game engine, I don't want you to work off of the triggers on individual computers like mine or Gary's or Kemper's, but I want you to work off of the NFO server that basically the game is being run on. So now we have that. I'm telling it that the minute that I walk into this, it's going to do what I want it to do. Now you can see the problem with that is I've got some bad guys already in there who would trip the trigger, and I'm in the trigger. So what we need to do is adjust the size, and you just do that like you would the other objects, the markers. Make sure no bad guys are in there. So you can see what we'll do. You see this tree right here? We'll set it so once I hit that tree, that'll be my visual cue I've hit the trigger. One other thing you might want to know about triggers, as you can see, you can define not only the size, you can define the height. -1 means it goes up into the sky. And let me show you what I mean by that. If I hit M and go into the map, pull back, you can see that this trigger goes to infinity and beyond, which is cool until Zulu fly over it, right? So you're going to want to set most of your triggers to a height, so that way if a ground element is meant to trip it, Zulu doesn't accidentally trip it. So 20 is usually the magical number for me, because you can see that Zulu aren't going to fly any lower than this. Obviously, I can actually afford to go a lot lower. You see how low that is now? The odds of Zulu, they'll be crashing if they hit this trigger, basically. All right, so we can see that this trigger is marked by this tree like I wanted. I can pull it out here so it's dead on. I know the visual cue is when I hit that tree, I'm in the trigger. You can see there's a little line down right here. And for whatever reason, it's saying it's not flush to the ground. You can actually drag this up and down. I don't think it really matters per se. The big key is if you're putting triggers in areas like this over here where the terrain goes down and up, you want to make sure that the trigger is not disappearing into the terrain. And I'll show you an example. If I put this here and I decide to make it 5 high, there. You see how the trigger is disappearing into the terrain right here? If I really need the trigger to be fired when someone hits this piece of the terrain, what I need to do is I need to make sure it's higher. So if I make the height 10, you can see now just fits in there. So always visually inspect your triggers to make sure that they are trippable. So we've told the trigger what to look for. In other words, when something happens, this is what I want you to look for. We've told it. Now we need to tell it what we want it to do when that event happens. And in this case, I want these guys to spawn in. I want this object modifier to trigger. So I want to sync this trigger when it goes off to the show module. And you can see show. So now you can do it either way. You can either grab that and sync to this, or you can grab the trigger and sync to that. Now say for instance, and this is really, really important, I accidentally synced it to the wrong trigger. And there's a way to avoid doing that, which I'll show you in a second. The way to unsync stuff is to basically grab it, sync to, and then just drag it off and click in empty space. Be careful how you do that, because if I do it as I just showed you, it's going to unsync everything connected to this module. So in this case, if I thought that I did the wrong trigger, I want to right click, sync to, and put it over here, and it'll just unsync the synchronization between the module and my trigger, and not everything that the module is synchronized to, if that makes sense. So let's put it back because we want that. So what we have, just to recap, I have a trigger. It's set up in this area. If an op4 comes in, it'll tell the game, hey, you know those guys you hid? I need you to show them now. As simple as that. So let's go ahead and bring my guy in so I don't have to run as much. And I can also show you they're not there. Set them up so it's looking directly in. And let's go as play as character. So you can see that there are no bad guys in there. You see the bad guys aren't in that little alleyway. We wouldn't be able to see them in the garage anyway, but they're certainly not in the alleyway. So now if I move forward, bang, instant bad guy, instant heartache. So that's how you do it. Now what we can do is we'll attach all the bad guys on there, so I can basically go through and populate each objective with as many bad guys as I like, and they're not going to be eating CPUs as we play the game. So we're going to go ahead and take off this trigger because I don't need this anymore. Let's take off this bad guy because otherwise I'll forget to take him off. Now I could basically carry on and put down all these various bad guys individually, or I could do this. This is going to come with a caveat. I could go down and I could decide, you can do it one of two ways. I can go to the squad based stuff, go down to militia, infantry, and you've got group and patrol. You can put these down and see, but a group is going to be bigger. You can see it's got a lot more guys. I can put down a group because they're all pre-configured. They're all linking to a leader. The issue with this is some of these have RPGs in them. Or I can go into the single player and create my own squad. Then I just basically keep these guys to one side and copy and paste them near the area I'm going to fill with bad guys, and then just place them. Why would I want to do this? Because what I can do is I can grab them there as a group, right click, go into your attributes, go into your special states, sorry, not special states, but AI, do the move. If I know that all these guys are going to be crouched, I would go ahead and click crouch. I'm not going to do that because I'm not sure. And then hit OK. Now every one of these guys, if I go into them, has their move taken off. So the beauty of this is I've just saved myself numerous clicks as I put down these guys and individually go and change their move options to say, hey, I don't want you to leave. In this case, I told you this is got an RPG. What we could do is, if you want to be very mischievous, I usually stick the RPG eyes off to a side, and they're spawned as well, and it gives sort of an Overwatch. We're not going to do that today because it's a nighttime mission. They probably wouldn't see anyway. And the beauty about this is you know how many bad guys you're putting down, because you can see I've got this set number of guys, and you're not going to overwhelm or underwhelm the members when we go in and play. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and use these guys. So Control C, Control V. So the other option is to go into and individually make up your own squad, and you can either go through and create one of these guys. You can go through and lay all these guys down and just do that and copy and paste and put them somewhere. The only downside to that is they're going to be in various positions, and you're going to have to go in, and there's no set position that you're starting with. Or if you want to do it the smart way, you basically say, okay, my lead guy is going to be this, then I'm going to have one of these, and you basically build your own custom squad. So it's really up to you how you do it. We're also going to use this method when we do our spawn guys. Right now we're just, again, doing it in layers. We're just doing the ones that are going to appear when we go to raid a compound. There are going to be some guys that spawn in and do things as well. But in the meantime, we're just doing the guys that are sitting there. So just grab them off the end. Oh, so I need to copy and paste these guys, right? Let's see. So I did Control C, but we'll do it again just in case. Control C, Control V. Now I want to group these guys to this guy right here, right? There he is. So let's grab this guy. Group to. Oh gosh. All right, so let's just grab them all. There we go. Now you can see all roads are leading to Rome. I think this guy's name is Rome. And so now all these people I've just placed down are going to be hooked up to this trigger. Or sorry, hooked up to this module right here. All right, so I'm going to stop my chitter chatter unless I got something interesting to tell you, and I'm going to go ahead and, oh look, we got one more guy to add, and I'm going to go ahead and lay these guys down. Now I have my guys basically placed down. This is going to be your base set of bad guys. In other words, these are the guys that they're going to have to push through. We need to make this look like a place that there's a reason bad guys are hanging out, right? So in other words, what you need is you need some sort of room where the HVT is going to be, some sort of planning room, something like that, as well as, hey, is this used for? This could be used for basically a place to bring in people, insurgents, get them up, set them out, the whole 9 yards. And you know what? See, look what I did. 2 of those people I put down were actually part of the thing. So what we need to do is we need to start adding some more stuff in here. So what I'm going to do is basically make this some sort of HQ, place where people can sleep. We'll put some interesting stuff in here. Never been to an insurgent camp, but we'll sort of spitball it. And then we'll stick some stuff in here, which will basically break up line of sight and make things difficult for both the bad guys and us as we go in. I really did like those guys there. So if I hit the back button, and again, the undo button, when they released Arma 3 and this editor, if you were to ask mission makers what the best feature was, it was an undo button. Because in the old days, we didn't have an undo button. And if you accidentally grabbed someone by mistake or something by being shifted over right, you had to go back in and do it. And heaven forbid if you grabbed more than one thing and it was a major change, you'd spend hours building something and then just mess it up with a single mouse click. Well, I can just basically hit back, and you can see that's the first set of movements I did for him, and bang, second. So now I can basically just grab these 2 guys, right click, group them to our leader here, and now they're no longer part of this group here. I'll have to remember, let's As a matter of fact, what I can do is I have to remember to basically redo these guys. Let's see if I can just, yeah, see, there they are. So we can delete these. There's the full guys, and that'll be my template for the next one. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do all that stuff. HQ, sleeping, stuff. And if I come across anything interesting, I'll let you know what I'm doing. But this really, my friend, is going in and playing with assets, getting to know where things are. And really 90% of your time is going to be just going through and looking at stuff and trying to work out what you want to do. So now, if you ever want to add a lived-in look, you need to make it like the zombie apocalypse. No, that's not true. What you need to do is, or one of the tricks I use is I actually will throw down a bunch of garbage. So if you find it under junk, there's actually two types of garbage that you can put on the ground. There's the 5x5, which just look like that. And then there's the 3x3, which just look like that. And then if you dot these around, it looks like a messy Does your mother never pick up after you, kind of thing. Now you notice I didn't make any of these indestructible and the whole 9 yards. So what I'm going to do is just highlight all of these. Right click. Go to the attributes. Special states. And now all of these, bang, are basically not going to take any CPU cycles from anybody. So that's a pretty convincing. And what I'll do is we are going to make our HVT hide in here. So I tend to make my HVT civilians. Just makes it a little bit easier. But obviously, because they're less likely to run away from you, although they will run if they're panicky, right? But that's just one of the things. So basically what I need to do is I need to find someone if he's... oh, that's Chinars, that's why I can't put him on. It looks like they're from the Middle East. So let's just go and take this guy. That'll be fine. And then what we'll do, he just woke up, so he's not going to have a hat. So we'll stick him by his cot. Make sure he doesn't move. Now, for some reason, this isn't 100%, and consequently, what we try to do for HVTs, mission makers I know anyways, we spawn them in right before they get to them. So, I actually plan on, can we see them from here? Yeah, I actually plan on having several triggers in here within this area. So we'll use one of those triggers to spawn him, and that'll happen in a minute. So now we actually have these guys set up. Everyone's on a hide unhide. We just need to do this guy. So what we'll do, the easiest way to do this, go into M, copy, and paste. Now, what's going to happen is if you get down the road and you have 5 of these, 6 of these, you're not going to know what they're relating to, and it could get a little complicated. So you want to use a handy dandy comment feature. So you're going to right click, place comment, and this is, actually, what is this? This is whiskey. So whiskey BG, which stands for bad guys. So now I know that I've got anything connected to whiskey bad guys, and I know that the trigger that is going to fire these off. As a matter of fact, let's do this. Let's set the trigger up. So what I want to do is basically I want to set a trigger to wherever they land. It spawns these guys in. So I already told you I'm looking at landing us right here because we want the raid to hit the ground and push out. So let's put a trigger right in this area. I'm a fan of square triggers, so we'll change that. Activation is going to be blue for server only, just in case we're slightly off. There you go. Now I could go the other way and I could basically make this encompass the whole area. So in other words, even if we're inserted outside of this area, say for instance, the Chinook overshoots by accident, right? Say for instance, they put us here. As we push towards, all these guys will be triggered, because what we're going to do, as a matter of fact, let's rename this. We're going to trigger age. We're going to trigger all the bad guys from this trigger. So what will happen is you'll see us sync these to whatever bad guys we stick in here as well. You got to be careful when you're doing that. If you put a load of too many bad guys at one time, you'll see I call it the Arma fart. Basically, you have a hesitation in the game and you know bad guys are being spawned in somewhere. That is unavoidable. It will happen sometimes, but you can try to avoid it by not spawning too many bad guys in at any given time. I mean, I think we have maybe 12 people in here, which is not a huge deal. But if you spawned in 50 or something silly like that, then obviously you're gonna have a bit of a lag. So I'm going to create a separate trigger, and I'll show you. So what will happen is this. I'm going to have 2 triggers in each compound. And the reason I'm having 2 triggers is because I want the triggers to set off various things happening elsewhere. And by having the 2 triggers, it'll give me an opportunity to have, when this happens, I want you to do this, right? So this first trigger, let's work this out. So if I come around this corner here and I suddenly hit the trigger, the guy will suddenly spawn. So ideally I need this guy over here, so that way he's not so obvious if you come around that corner, right? So if I come around this corner here and he spawns, I won't see him spawn in. That's not going to work, because well, if he comes up here, they won't see him. Come around this corner, they won't see him. We get right here. If you're already in there, yeah, see, that'll work right there. Because obviously people know you're spawning stuff in, but you want to try to keep the magic a little bit, right? All right, so that's perfect. That'll be my first trigger. Pull that in just a little bit there. We're gonna copy. Oh, look. You see what I saw? If I put it over here, I've got trigger, none, present. In other words, it's telling me I haven't defined what the activation is, so I want to set that to blue for. And if you don't have that set up, what will happen is the trigger doesn't know what to look for, and whatever you've connected to it won't fire. So Control C, and what we'll do is we'll set this up. Actually, scratch that. This is what we're going to do. It's getting a little complicated. This is what we're going to do. We're going to make this encompass the whole thing. So the minute that you walk in, this guy's going to be shot. He's going to suddenly appear. So we're going to call this HVT. Age. You're going to have a lot of stuff, so you want to make sure you understand what each one is. So there's that HVT age. Grab them both. Right click, sync to. And attach them to that. Sync to. Because I copied and pasted, I know the bottom one is the I know the bottom one is the one that shows them. This right here, this was my landing trigger. Right? Now I had to double check that. How can I not double check that? Well, I will tell you. So you can actually name these triggers, and it's actually something you want to do. So if I open this up, I can give this a variable name. Understanding you can't have spaces or anything like that with a variable name. I'm going to name this age_LZ TRG, which is my abbreviation for trigger. Now, if you look over here, you'll see I can see by a glance, and when I hover it over it, it tells me what I want this to do. So if I do the same for the next one, which is this one right here, double click it. Again, it's in the age, so it's going to be age_HVT TRG. Right? Make sense? So now over here, I can see at a glance what my different triggers do. And if you start getting a bunch of stuff on here, what you can do is you can actually grab it, right click on the name, and now you can see that this is my HVT LZ sync 2, bang. I don't have to find the actual trigger on the map. So in instances where you've got a trigger over here doing something over here, this is really easier just to use this to connect across the map rather than trying to click this and then zoom out, drag it across, zoom in, find your object and sync it. So that's a really easy way to do it. So what's going to happen is Chinook's going to land as soon as they come within this trigger, and let's make sure that we've got a height on this trigger, which we don't. So we're going to make it, actually let's make it 10, because we want it actually boots on the ground to be the when the event is kicked off. So you can see that the Chinook can hover over this at 20 meters, and not that they would do that, and these guys wouldn't actually shoot at them, right? It's not until we actually get on the ground that, or someone runs into this area, that the bad guys are going to be spawned, which is what we want. So as they land, bad guys are spawned. We push over. Now, the situation is we're doing this at 1 o'clock in the morning, and really there shouldn't be a bunch of bad guys roaming around. Everyone should be in bed. You'll have some sentry posts. That's what we sort of posted up here. We're assuming by the time they get it, people have woken up and grabbed their rifles, and that's why they have the positions they have. You also have to figure that if you have bad guys who may not be in with the the cell terrorist leader, they're still living at home with mom, they're going to run from wherever they are to see what the commotion is. So what we want to do is we want to have bad guys come over here and check out what's going on. You're not going to have a whole platoon of guys, right, living in one house. So what we're going to do is we're going to do it in 2s and 3s. And this is where you're going to start to see the Jebus script come in. So what we'll do is this, is we'll grab a couple of these guys. I'm going to show you a couple of really neat things here during this one. And it's all going to be riflemen. So let's grab these two. Control C. Or, because if I copy and paste these and I go into their attributes, you can see that I'm telling them not to move. If you want someone to run across the map, it's a good idea not to stop them from running. So let's just grab 2 guys. So let's do an infield to give us a chance. And then, well, you know what, we'll do 3 guys. How about that? And an AK-47. There. So these are going to be my guys. So what I can do is this. You know what? Let's do 3 sets of guys. Oh, we'll do that in a minute. All right. So what I want is this: is when that trigger goes off and the people hear the helicopter coming in, I want them to supposedly jump out of bed and run in towards where we're going. So I am going to use Jebus. So going to my script, let's go over. You can read what all this stuff says. These are what anything referenced in the command lines. This is the definition of what you're trying to tell it to do. So basically what you do is we put this command line in the init box, and you'll see this in a minute, of the leader of the group that you're going to spawn in. And whatever this line is you're telling the script to do, it will do. In this case, the one I've highlighted, forget code, you're telling it you only want it to spawn once. This is a range. I've also seen it to where you just have one number in there. You can just have one. I always do 1 to 1. Why would you have a range? Because in some of these, and as you've seen in the past, we'll have people come at us from different directions. In reality, you have one set of bad guys spawning in 3 different locations, randomly chosen by the script, and they're spawning anywhere between 5 and 10 times, depending on what number I put in here, right? Why do we want it random? Because that way no one knows, not even the mission makers knows how many bad guys are going to be spawning. That's why you also do the spots, because if you have someone respawning in the same spot every time, it doesn't take long for you to work out where that spawn site is, and you just basically spend the rest of the mission looking at that one spot, and it's pretty boring. Although, you know, Alpha have been getting really good to where they've been finding even these random spawn spots, so we'll have to work around that. That's where you would have, so if I wanted someone to spawn out of this house and run down here to see what's going on 10 times, I would choose this line of code, because basically I'm telling it just to spawn. So we're going to explain these as we use them, because the downside is if I want people to come from all these different houses, every time I put somebody in, I'm going to have to tell them where to run. And let me show you what I mean. Let's say, for instance, I want someone to wake up over here. Let's give it a little bit of distance. And we'll have them come in out of this house. Okay, so if I put that code in here, if I put this code in here right here, copy, and you notice I go to the head guy. You can tell he's the head guy because he has that arrow at the top. Go up to his init, paste that in there, and then I'm going to sync this to the trigger. Right click, sync to, and we want it when we can either have it when they're landing. Let's just do that for now. When the helicopter comes, these guys get out and go, what's going on? And they'll run over, they'll spawn in. I have to tell them where to run. So you hit F4, go to waypoints. Each waypoint does its own little thing. I'm not going to go through every one of these. Your basic waypoint is move. I already had my guy highlighted. Let's do this. Let's delete that and start again so you can see. I highlight my guy, come here, I hit move. So if I have him, if I put that down, as soon as he spawns, he runs over to here. If you open up the spawn, you have a lot of different options. Combat, you can sit there and see that you have various options. In other words, you're telling the AI you want them to do this at that waypoint. An example would be when I was in Avon, I had the guys who were dressed up as ANA forced hold fire until they got close, so it looked like they were friendlies. Generally speaking, you're probably not going to play with that. Just keep it unchanged. Behavior, if you want people just to walk, like do a patrol, you're always going to do safe. And you can see that they give you hints right here. Weapons are going to be lowered, vehicles are going to follow roads. It's just a good day in the neighborhood. If you do anything else like aware, basically what's going to happen is they're going to have their gun up and they're going to walk, which won't look good for an unsuspecting patrol. So this we're just basically going to keep it unchanged because we're going to want them to run. And to do this, I'm going to do a full run. This dictates what you want their formation to be. So we'll go ahead and do a column. So when they get there, that running that waypoint, they're going to do a column and they're going to be running. And I would have to basically go through the gate, come over here, come down here, and run over here. So you can see I'm going to have to do this for every set of bad guys I have dotted around here. Or let's highlight these waypoints. You see the bottom was highlighted. I press shift, do the top, hit delete. They all disappear. Or I could go down to this code right here. The snippet is Gia move and then a number. And if you look up here, Gia move, group added to Gia with move parameter. Well, it doesn't really tell you what it does, so I will. Let me grab this first of all. And put it in their code. Needs to be within these brackets. So I'll post it between the lives. And I need to make sure there's an apostrophe. So you can see it's saying lives 1-1, Gia, move, apostrophe 9. Right? We're going to make this a 1 because what you're referring to, Gia move, means when they come out, they're going to head towards a marker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a marker right between both of our objectives because we're going to have first air assault personnel here. I'm going to have first air assault personnel here. So I go over to my markers, pick this. I'm going to do an ellipse, and we're going to put it in the middle. I'm going to make this small because I just want them to run towards it. And I told you I changed that to 1. I need to make this a variable name of 1. So what's going to happen when these guys spawn is they're just going to make the best route possible to here. And then obviously what's going to happen is they're going to run into us. Now the advantage is I can basically copy and paste these guys. Obviously we're going to change them up a little bit so they look a little bit more random. But with that code, with everyone having this code, I only want them to spawn once and I want them to run to marker number 1. And this is using the script to do all that. And I'm not going to have to lay down waypoints for every person. Now, if you want to be clever and you want to try to sneak them around and stuff like that and maybe have them flank, you can, but you have to understand you really don't know where anyone is. I'm just hoping that we have people in this general area and we have people in this general area. If these people don't see them, whoever is doing a protective perimeter on this will see it. So it'll give us a lot to shoot at. Now, you may say this is going to show up on the map as a marker and people are going to suspect everything. And you would be right to think that. Except if you go into the files that we just copied over, and this is where we're going to start looking at these files, you have various files set up to tell the game what you want to do. These tend to be description.ext and init.sqf. These are just technical terms for files. So the description file, the game looks to it for certain things. You're basically, the description file for the most part tells the game to run stuff and to look here for this. And you can see that we've got the GOM scripts, I think I'm saying right, the Gaia, and then the Jebus, and the GOM scripts, and basically how to run the UI. So that's what your description is. And these are all on the forums, and you can see I copy and paste them. You're in it. I'm going to right click and open this with a notepad because Otherwise, my fancy editor will come up. You can see here, it's saying that it's going to hide the markers. We set the markers invisible. If you have more than 100 markers, then you need to increase. If you have more than 100 markers, that's one heck of a game. And then, or you delete them if you want them invisible. And it's this piece of code that is actually going to hide. It's going to go ahead and hide the markers from people seeing it on the map. You don't see the init player local very often. I've not seen it that often. We actually have this. This is for your GOM scripts. So there's a big difference if you all spawn into the game together, and then, or you just come in later, or you disconnect and come back in. For certain things, the game needs to know to repoint you to be able to have access at something, and that's what that's doing. That's basically making sure that even if you join after the game is initially launched and all those parameters are run, you'll still have access to that GOM script, and that's probably far more than you wanted to know. So now you know all that. As long as we don't go over 100 of these, mark them and named 1 to 100, these are never going to show up on the map. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start placing some of these bad guys around the area so that way they run into this. I'm also going to come in and I'm going to add a little bit of stuff in here to make it look like it's a IED factory, a VEID factory, so that way it looks like we know we're on the right thing, that we should actually be here when we're raiding it. Then once we've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to do a really exciting part. We're going to actually give Alpha and Zulu, who will be on that hill over there, something to shoot at. If I see anything interesting, I'll slow it down and come back to you.
So now to put down the bad guys who are going to try to escape by car. So that's why we left some of these cars workable. So what's going to happen? I see I have some workable cars. There's one right here. And it's armed, which is perfect. So we'll choose this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a group of 3 guys run out of here and drive along this road. You see it's going to be a nice slow drive, and this may not work because right here is a bridge, and the AI hate bridges, so we're going to have to check out this one. Let's have a look and see what that bridge looks like. Yeah, this may or may not work. So it's really crucial that you do what I'm about to show you. It'll make your life a lot easier. You just can't lay these things down and expect them to work. You actually have to go through and test them, which probably is the biggest part outside of dressing your set of mission making. All right, so I need 3 bad guys, and I'll tell you what, just because I want to show you how it's done, we'll actually manually put these guys down. So let's find our militia men. It doesn't really matter who you're going to choose because these guys are going to be getting in a vehicle. Alright, so those are the guys. So what I want them to do, I'm going to click on the main guy, click on F4 or my waypoints, move, scratch that. We're going to do get in nearest and put it, you can actually put it on the car if you want to, if you have a specific car in mind. So what you're doing is you're telling these people that you want them to get in this car and we want them to drive. So just hit move. Now, make sure you open up the attributes, hit safe, and then limited. If you don't, the driving's going to be so terrible, you probably won't make it anywhere. Technically, what you're supposed to be able to do is I'm supposed to be able to put, say, a waypoint here, and it'll follow the road. Doesn't always happen. Everyone has their own way of doing it. I tend to put the waypoints at major curves just to make it work better. Sometimes you'll have to pull these back, and that's really what this is about. See, look, I did one wrong here. See, it says scripted. I accidentally clicked the wrong one. If you do that, just double click on it, bring up the attributes, change it to move. Because what you're doing is, in a way, this is one of the examples of how flexible Arma can be. You're basically, the game is looking to you to tell it what you want the AI to do at every one of these points. So you literally, as I mentioned earlier, you can have them start off to where they're not shooting and then they hit a certain point and then they draw up their guns. In reality, does it always work? Does the AI always follow you what you want them to do? No. AI is very difficult to program in a game, I understand. So now what we're going to do is when we get to this bridge, you can see the bridge is essentially different pieces of a road, right? So what I'm going to try to do to make them, to coax them to going across the bridge. So I'm going to basically say, hey, just nudge up to this next piece. This may or may not work. It's really, there are no definitive odds because sometimes it rocks and other times it just doesn't work at all. So what I'm going to do is leave the waypoints there because we're going to watch it and see A, if they drive along this path in a decent manner, and B, get across this road. So to do this, basically what I want to do is let's just copy one of these guys, Control C, Control V. Now we're going to right click, play as the character. And what we'll do is we'll go into the in-game, in-editor camera, and we'll watch them, and we'll see how they behave. And 9 times out of 10, very rarely, but most of the time if you can see it in the single editor, how they manage the waypoints, it'll work. Where it goes a little funky is if you have more than one vehicle. And quite frankly, how they do it in single player may not be necessarily how they do it on the server. So hit escape, go to camera. Right now, if you look down here, accu time is set at 0 by default. So it's not going to do anything, which is good because it allows you the time to position the camera how you want it. When you have it where you want it, just come over here and hold down your left mouse button and pull that over, and you'll see they continue their journey. Getting in the okay, see, here's the problem. If you look, one of the guys got into one of the undrivable vehicles, so we're missing someone in the gun, which honestly doesn't matter because you don't want them to shoot. This is just a target for Zulu to an Alpha to take out. So the down point to put in a lot of waypoints is you'll notice that the vehicle stops or slows down when they get to a waypoint, because it's basically doing what? It's mimicking human nature, right? It's thinking what it's doing when it's getting there. So that is the only downside to having a lot of waypoints. But again, no AI is perfect. But it seems to be holding the road pretty well so far, which is good. Alright, so he is going to go around the bridge. Alright, so that's fair. You know what? We can work with that. First thing we want to do is we're going to go ahead and shift these guys over a little bit to make it more obvious which car we want them to go into. Shift it over it. Let's go over here. And what we'll do is, since we can see that they're willing to off-road it for us, we'll just have them go around the bridge. What do you say? You should always check by hitting M to make sure that your markers are on the road. The visual road that you see isn't always represented by the map. I'm not 100% sure which is the more correct one, but it does seem to me that when I don't quite have my markers on the road, like this one here, they tend to drive off the edge more often than not, which isn't a big deal. The only time that really is going to affect you is if you if it's in a heavy built-up urban environment. And basically what will happen is they'll run into posts and stuff. All right, so I want to highlight this last waypoint and then click move, because I highlighted it to remind the game which waypoint I consider the last one. And you can see if you look over here, this is the vehicle, or sorry, this is the squad, and you can get a list of the waypoints you've put down. So if you see that one of these isn't what it should be, you can actually go back and fix it pretty darn quickly. So all right, that's good enough, because basically Alpha Zulu should have got this guy by the time he gets here. If they don't, they've missed their opportunity, and more about that in a second. So if we were to leave it exactly as it is, as soon as the game starts, these guys will run out and they'll jump in this vehicle and they'll go off. So let's test this one more time, make sure that they do get past that bridge. Escape, go to camera, Q to raise it up, and let's go ahead and do the accu time. If you hit backspace, it'll remove this frame. And then if you hit, oh no, you can't. If you actually come, if you're not in the camera, you can actually speed up this process. You can speed up in-game time up to 4 times. You do that by pressing the plus key along the top of the keyboard near the numbers, and you'll see it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 times. But you have to be in-game. I guess you can't do it through the camera. So that really speeds things up when you're testing. Basically, imagine it, you're doing everything in a quarter of the time it would normally take. But you'll have the magic of video editing, so I'll speed this up so you don't have to take as long to watch it as I did in real time. And there we go. Is it realistic? No. Having them go through the riverbed there, no. But it works, which is sometimes that's all that matters when you're making a mission. All right, so if we're to leave this exactly as it is, as soon as you booted up the game, these guys would run into the truck and drive down the road, which we don't want. So what we need to do is we need to work out a way to let them know when to do it. Now you could... the traditional way of doing this is placing a waypoint really, really close to them. It has to be close, whether it's a person or a vehicle. And then basically syncing that waypoint with a trigger. Well, the problem with that is these guys are going to be you'll be able to see these guys. So basically Alpha or Zulu will say, hey, there's 3 guys just standing around in this compound, and they'll probably attract attention, which you don't want. So what we need to do is physically spawn them in right before we need them. And how we do that is we are going to use our Jebus script. And if you remember, these guys had the Jebus script right here. This one, they're only going to spawn once. Now, we don't need this move because we've given them waypoints. Remember, this made them run towards the circle. So if I delete that part, basically it's just telling them to spawn once, and it's calling the script. And if you want to double check, which why wouldn't you? I have closed this, but we can quickly open it up for you. You can see that's exactly what it says. This lives, and I tell you what, just to be safe, we'll copy this, and you can see that the hint says respawns group with default parameters uses editor waypoints, which is what we want. So let's just put that in. Okay, see what I did? I actually... Alright. Okay, so that's what we want it to be. I changed that. We didn't want to do that. However, good job I caught that. So let's put this one in here. Alright, so now we just need to decide what is going to be the event or the trigger that's going to set this off. And I think what we should do is we should have it happen as soon as first air assault forces enter this compound for the raid. So what we do is right click on the trigger, sync to, and bring it down here, and as mentioned before, sync it to the top guy, the lead guy, which is designated by your little diamond there. So now what will happen is as soon as the good guys enter this trigger, if you remember this trigger, if you look, is going to be set off by blue 4. We're telling the game, hey, whatever's connected to this trigger, we need to make happen. In this case, we're going to reveal or unhide all these bad guys right here, as well as our HVT. So you can see it goes there. Well, this one, no, this one does our HVT. This one is done by the actual insertion. And then what will happen too is this trigger will also set off these guys running off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you one other way to stage stuff, and then I'm going to go do a bunch of them. So I'm going to walk you through how to stage stuff. So I mentioned earlier that you don't necessarily need an area around every trigger, and I'll show you what we mean. So if I just take this trigger right here, and I usually keep it close to the one that's going to set it off, and put it down. Whenever I come across a neat idea to use in mission making, I basically save it. So it's in my editing folder, and you can see here, and some of these go back to 2015. So these are Arma 2 stuff, which may or may not still work with Arma 3. So what I do is mine's under managing triggers. Basically, I categorized it, and basically you can see trigger activates trigger. And by the way, this is not me typing out these instructions. I basically copy and paste it when I find it. Should give the zone trigger a name, and then spawn the trigger's condition. All right, so in other words, this is saying it's going in the condition box. So I'm just going to copy this for now, and we'll walk through what we're doing. So what's going to happen is a trigger's going to be set off. This trigger is monitoring that trigger. In other words, when it sees that trigger goes off, whatever we tell this trigger to do, it will do. You can't do too many of these, but they're really handy for what I'm about to show you. So again, let's make sure we do server only. You don't have to worry about these because you're using these trigger expression boxes. So condition basically means this is what the event is. You're telling the trigger when this happens, this is the event that's going to make this trigger be triggered. In this case, it is that command I just copied. Trigger activated trigger 1. So this is the command trigger activated, and then this is looking for the trigger that just triggered. Always make sure you have a semicolon at the end, because you can put as many of these commands, different commands in the box, but they have to be separated by the semicolon. So before we go any further, let's make sure we put the right trigger. So let's hit OK. Now the trigger we want to set off is going to be when they go into this compound. So the easiest way, and this is another reason you name all your triggers, the easiest way to make sure I'm doing the right one is I can see that this is age HVT trigger, right? And if I highlight the trigger over here, you can see it shows the one I want. It's the one I want. So double click it, bring it up. I copy the name, Control C, cancel so I don't accidentally change the trigger. Go back to the trigger that I want, that I'm working on, and where it says trigger 1, I'm going to highlight that and then just Control V. So what's going to happen when this is activated? It's going to flip this trigger. Well, if this trigger is, if we leave this trigger exactly as it is, those guys are going to spawn at exactly the same time, within nanoseconds of that first trigger being triggered, which really what's the point of having the second trigger? So what I want to do is I want there to be a little bit of time. In other words, if we're looking at this as a real world event, the raid happens, the guys are waking up, and they're like, you know what, we should just get this truck out of here. So let's allow them 60 seconds. So to do this, we can do the timer. Countdown, basically, trigger counts down, does an eternal clock until it triggers. And then timeout, you can see you're saying that, say for instance, this was linked to where Op4 walked into a trigger. You can sit there and say they have to be in that trigger for X amount of time for this to kick off. So if someone casually walked through and then walked out again, it may not necessarily kick off the trigger. So we're going to do the countdown. That's the one I always tend to use. So this is really weird. If I were to put my cursor in there and type 60, it makes it 600. It keeps the original number that's already there. So you just have to put 6 in, and you can see it makes 60. So the timer value is minimum. This is the earliest still trigger, midpoint, max. In other words, this is the furthest still trigger. You can make it variable, and the idea of the variable is not anyone knows. I always tend to make it the same, but that's just me. So now I hit OK, and you can see that what we have here is a trigger that has no area to it. Basically, oh, you know what I need to do? Let's name this. So So if I can't name this the same as the one that's already named, because you would just confuse everybody, right? So what we need to do is, I'm going to call this HVT 01. In other words, it's another one after the HVT event. So now what will happen, people will run into this compound. The game will start a timer of 60 seconds because this trigger has been triggered. And then at the 60-second point, it will do what I tell it to do. So what we need to do is we need to link this to the event that we want it to set off, which is going to be another set of bad guys running out into a vehicle and trying to drive it off. So basically, you're going to have this first one, the vehicle go out, and then you're going to have the second one where these guys have woken up a little bit later and they're going to get in their truck. So you're staggering these vehicles leaving. So we need to find another place. I'm not sure. Let's find it. Where did we have another vehicle that was drivable? Use that one. Here we go. So the beauty about this is we can copy paste. Where, here we go. Here's our guys. We've got the code in there and everything. Control C. Here is our truck. You know what? Oh, there's already guys in there. We'll do them over here. Because what you really want to present is a flurry of activity, right? All of a sudden, everybody's just running everywhere. Hit F4 for your waypoints. We're going to do get in nearest. Remember this one here. We're going to have to move this because they had the issue before. Although it really doesn't matter because they're both guns. Move. Now, once you've done one set of waypoints and you see they work, you can basically shadow those waypoints. So what I can do is, so let's make sure we go in and set this. Safe, slow. And once that's set, unless you change the trigger, it's going to retain those settings. So you don't have to put that in every one. So what I'm going to do is shadow these waypoints that I did before because they're a known entity. I know they work, right? So now I'm just going to shadow these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this down. And I'm going to stagger a couple more. And I'm going to do them from both sides. And on both sides, I'm also going to put the guys that come out and run off and just do a lot of bad guy activity. in order to space these out a little bit better, we're going to create another trigger that is going to be set off by that first trigger, but the timing will be just a little bit different. And rather than go ahead and start from scratch and go through and copy and paste everything, we can actually just copy the trigger, paste it, and obviously going to change the name, and then we'll also go in and actually change the time. So now we've got a trigger that will go off at 240 seconds, and this will give you a staggered effect of the bad guys spawning in, and there aren't that many triggers. Now there's a lot of triggers going on and there's a lot of guys spawning at different times. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and label or put a comment above the triggers, and we'll go through and actually, you'll see at one point, we'll go through and start actually putting comments above the bad guys themselves. Because what will happen is you get so many bad guys on your workplace, on the map that you're working on, the mission you're working on, and you won't be able to very quickly see what is actually spawning those particular bad guys. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put a comment above it. So at a glance, you can see literally how many bad guys are coming into each set of waves or each trigger that's being set off. Now, the beauty about this is it's a very quick visual representation of the flow of battle. So in other words, if you want to have a certain flow, a certain speed to your missions, this is the quickest way to see how the bad guys are spawning into your mission. So basically we can change this up, and rather than having all the bad guys that spawn when the ground troops enter the actual X-ray compound, instead of having them just run towards here, we can actually make it more focused, and with this and have them come directly towards X-ray. So we'll stick 2 or 3 down for that. So now I'm going to save myself some time. Instead of recreating these 2 scripts, these 2 triggers, I'm going to go ahead and copy, paste them. And what I can do is change this to the trigger that is going to trigger them, which is this. So basically copy that. Go over here. And now this is going to be the trigger that triggers this one. And instead of doing it, so that'll be perfect. So basically what will happen is as soon as these people breach this compound, this will be activated and it'll count 2 minutes from that point. Let's go over and set this one up. Paste that in. So you can see now, X-ray trigger. And this will be 4 minutes. So now I can stagger the bad guys coming in. And whereas the first school of thought is, well, it's going to seem very uniform having these guys spawn and come in towards here 2 minutes, and these guys spawn and come in here in 2 minutes. Well, you have to understand the variable of these will only start that 2 minute and 4 minute once this is being breached by these and this is being breached by these. So in other words, unless these are done perfectly simultaneously, which never happens, what's going to happen is there will be a randomness to the spawning of the bad guys. So let's go ahead and set up the 2 and the 4, and then what I'll do is I'll set up the vehicles like we did on this side so that we have some vehicles shooting off in the other direction.
Well, we're going to end part 2 right there, my friends. If you head on over to part 3, we'll continue to build the mission, and we'll be taking a look at staggering AI spawns, troubleshooting 101, the animal module, and testing and even more troubleshooting. Thanks for your company on this, and I hope you enjoyed it.